Okay, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Go ahead and grab your refreshments and whatever, and we'll get it going. My name is Craig Eddy. I'm the facilitator for the Hydraulic Planning Advisory Panel. Let's go around the table and introduce the panel members and then the technical staff, starting with Kurt.
Kurt Secretary, City of Charlottesville.
Go ahead.
Mark Tuca with O'Connor Capital Partners.
Chuck Rodkin, Eastern Management Company.
Dale Sanders, Holiday Inn on Indian Street.
Alan Taylor, Riverfront Development. Chip Boyles with the Thomas Jefferson Planning District and the area MPO.
Morgan Butler, Southern Environmental Law Center.
Kathy Gallagher, Charlottesville City Council.
Mark Graham, Albemarle County.
Alex Gibb from the City of Charlottesville. And Franklin McKeel, Howard County. Board of Supervisors.
And the technical staff, starting with Dave.
Dave Covington, VDOT, Charlottesville Residency.
Sally Sarah, Assuming Loan Associates.
Carl Tuesday, Associates.
Sean Proctor, VDOT Corporation Planning.
Paul Friedlander, Michael Baker, International Transportation Team.
And in the back.
Lou Hatter, VDOT Communications.
All right, thanks everybody.
Andrew, too, because he's presenting.
Oh, yes, Andrew Gaspray is also here with Albemarle County. He's got a part of the presentation today. You'll be hearing from him later. So here's our interaction and feedback. We had 8 live stream viewers for the last meeting, which was down a little bit from the previous one. And there was no feedback this past period, so nothing to discuss there. So here's some of the things that we talked about, just as a matter of refreshment for everybody. We talked about what we're going to do with July meetings, and it was decided that we were going to forego July meetings. That's where we're going to be in a crunch on the technical side, doing a lot of data. We talked about maybe only doing one, but we decided not to do any in July, so the technical team can be crunching numbers and doing their thing, so that when we get back together in August, we'll have some substantial things to talk about. So no meetings in July. Then we finalized, I think we finalized the vision statement. We've had minor tweaks each of the last couple of meetings, but I think we finally got the wording exactly as we would like it. It was just one minor word change. You'll see that in a little bit. We talked about an example rubric for selection matrix that we'll show you again. That's item number 4. Then we rolled out some concepts. We talked about doing some additional imaging for concept 1 and the connectivity to Michi Drive. And then there were some examples of some stormwater features, and someone asked for a map overlay to see where those how those related to potential green space. So those were action items from last meeting. And you'll see most of those in agenda item 4. Here's our final vision statement. The minor wording was down here. We were encouraging the use of natural features instead of using, I think was the minor word change. But I think that's finally put to bed. Everyone still happy with that? Okay. So I'm going to need to dwell on that. Here was the example rubric that it can be used as a selection matrix or a decision matrix, where we had the concepts on the left and then the features at the top, and the relative improvement for bike bed and crossing various locations was one set of columns, and then some other criteria. But that's a typical rubric selection matrix that we'll most likely develop something similar to in order to screen concepts and make some choices.
And Craig, if I can add, just to remind everybody at our last meeting, we went over a comment from the public where this was included as an attachment, and some members of the panel wanted to see it. So this comes directly from that. We were in the process of developing something very similar to this to use for this sort.
And we as a panel will be deciding, what the concepts are, what the criteria are, and developing our own axes to the matrix. So here's our schedule. What we've completed is checked, so we're through March and April. And actually all the way through May now, and the next big item there is the concept screening. That's to take place the day after our next meeting. So we've got a lot of work to do at this meeting and then next meeting in order to come up with preferred concept. And then it'll only be preferred in one setting, but we'll continue to fine tune it as we go through getting the external transportation inputs and we fine tune the core area plan. So it's a starting point and it'll go through some evolution and some ebb and flow before we lock it in. And then we have the public meeting number 2 in August under the small area plan in September and so forth. So that's what we have ahead of us. Now, the work that we've completed since the last meeting, Sal's been busily taking care of some additional land use concept alternatives. We talked about transportation inputs and methodology. And I've got to tell you that I asked the impossible of Paul last meeting. You may recall we thought we'd like to look at some transportation impacts of the various concepts. And I got the cart before the horse. And over the course of the last 2 weeks, I came to realize that we really need to have the land use piece mature before we start looking at the transportation, because there's so many different options to it, and it's so interrelated. So I kind of set the expectation last time that we might be able to see how they compared transportation-wise. We're not there yet. It's too much. It was too much work to do in 2 weeks, and we had to make these heroic assumptions that may not have been in alignment. So that's on me. We're not going to get there today. We're going to continue to focus on the land use concepts and talk about the likes and dislikes and advantages and disadvantages. So hopefully we'll have some clarification on the one concept that people asked to see a little bit more work on, and we'll go from there. So I wanted to just kind of set the clock back a little bit and let you know that we aren't going to be there like I thought, or like I told you. Currently working on additional land use concepts. We've got to come up with that rubric matrix, the screening criteria we're going to come up with. And then the transportation inputs. There's internal inputs, which are based on the land use in the study area, and there's external transportation inputs, which come from the areas outside that influence the roadway network in our study area. So this is where we turn it over to Sal and revisit and enhance some of the things we talked about last meeting with regard to the land use concepts. I think you'll see some interesting new things, and feel free to interject as you care to as he's going through these to make sure we understand it. Because as I mentioned earlier, we've got to come up with a screening, we're scheduled to come up with a screening, and we have to understand these concepts in totality and understand what their impacts are and the implications on other things. So, Sal?
Thank
To you.
All right, good afternoon. This slide is simply our reminder of kind of our basis and something kind of guiding principles. So what we did after the last meeting, as Craig alluded to, was we said, okay, let's pause for a second on the land use conversation. We had good conversations last time, and let us do a little more external transportation input, working with Paul and his group, and have him react and respond to where we were on land use at the time, and then again do more of that iterative process. So what you're going to see for us this week is really more of a focus on the framework again, just refining some of the framework, and also giving you a little bit more of character sketches and ideas on some of these key elements of the framework plans. As you know, we've got essentially 3 or 4 framework plans where we kind of move the center of activity from hydraulic and 29 and potentially a little bit further north, and even some discussion about some alternative framework ideas down on the south end around Angus. So that's what you're going to see today, kind of the focus on around the framework. So again, what we're going to review are these framework concepts, and we've got sort of a new one going here. And this came out of some really good conversations we had on the transportation external inputs from Paul's group. And we met, we looked at our framework plans and said, okay, let's start to think about a little bit back and forth about what the framework plans we're proposing, what they mean to the overall network, and then back again what that means to from a land use perspective. And again, we're doing this from a land use focus. And again, we're checking in with the transportation inputs, but we're still focused on land use. But the two are really totally integrated. So again, the concepts we've been talking about are at 29 in hydraulic, 29 over with the lower level public plaza, 29 over with a or under with an upper level plaza, daylighted up above. And then the Zan Road Land Bridge or Park Bridge, we'll show you a concept there. That's essentially that mid-block crossing that we talked about last time. You're going to see a concept where it's moving a little further south just in terms of making it work from a topographic standpoint, but also from a land use standpoint with some advantages. And then one where we do that land bridge mid-block, but also look at maybe doing the same thing down in Angus. And the conversation on all of these is what do you do at 29 hydraulic? So the concepts are either your grade separated option at 29 hydraulic, or if we look at 3 and 3A, when we look at those, leaving 29 hydraulic at grade, but talking about limiting turning movements to improve the operation of that intersection. So that was a concern last time. I think it was more of a graphic issue. People were saying, well, how come you're not doing anything at 29 hydraulic? The reality is we're always going to make improvements there, whether it's grade separator or whether it remains at grade. So we're going to look at these 4 approaches. So these are similar, again, just to revisit. 1 and 2 framework plans are essentially the same except for the treatment of 29 hydraulic, again, whether you put it under or over, and what that means in terms of that public space here. If you recall, you can start to see that whole structure, block structure that we've started to integrate in all the concepts. They're very similar on most of the concepts. There's a couple of options we can talk about. But in general, what we're talking about is when you grade separate 29 hydraulic, where does the traffic go? What does that mean to street typology? And then what does that mean to the land uses associated with those streets? And so the obvious conversation is if we remove or limit movements at 29 hydraulic, we then start to look at the need and the desire to establish parallel networks so that people can make moves north and south and east and west, not at that intersection. And so when you do that, you start to move traffic through areas which may have to result in a different typology for the streets, which has an impact. For example, if you're running through what is today legacy residential, what does that mean to those areas from a land use perspective? Doesn't mean they're no longer residential. Most of these areas, some of these certainly probably stay residential, but maybe that residential takes a different form and the density, the streets look a little bit different. So that's really the conversation. The traffic has to go somewhere, and from a land use perspective, we have to start dealing with what are the impacts on the parallel networks to make the whole network work together. We're going to have to talk about what things may need to look or operate or feel differently. So this is the one with the plaza down below. And this is a quick one, just a visual of, in most of these concepts, the overall framework is very similar. The highlighted is actually what would be proposed conceptually as new streets. So all the highlighted are streets that don't exist today, are extensions of existing streets. So, it's maybe some of you may think it's more extensive or less extensive than you might have thought, but it's, we can accomplish a lot of good block structure without, really disturbing a lot of the existing network. Sometimes it's just a small connectivities. This was the graphic you saw before of the lower level plaza with that concept one where you can move under throughout this whole area at grade through all the quadrants with a combination of a plaza and transitioning to where existing grades are, essentially down at the elevation where the existing Kmart site is today. Essentially, you can move all through here. part of that would be undercover, not all of it, but a portion of that would be under 29. And then that was the character sketch that we showed. I think there was, generally, not a tremendous amount of support for this, but there was enough support that we didn't want to take it off the table as a potential concept last time, so we left it in there. And then this is just an overlay on that framework again to show where where the topography and the drainage basins patterns want to be. I made a comment last time that there was very little stormwater management facilities in here. To clarify that, and Chuck called me on that, surface is what I was talking about in terms of surface water in the area. It's very minimal. There's some underground detention BMP facilities. But for an area this big and given the stormwater regs, there's really, you would expect to see more surface water in an area this size. This is nothing more than saying this is where the water wants to go. And it came to that conversation is what if we decided to make water an organizing element and a central feature? You start to see where it lines up on the framework. In some places it may be problematic, in other places it may make some sense. In all of these, we're outside of the conservation easement that exists just to the east of Mickey Drive, along the creek system and the trail system. We stay out of that, but certainly this is where the water ultimately wants to go. Concept 2, again, similar structure. The only thing was the reversing the over-under at the intersection. So this would put the plaza on top, which got a lot of support, at least a lot of interest last time. This is a new character sketch, again, of what it might be like to be able to move throughout this plaza. 29 now is going under, so it ramps down here, it comes back out on the south end, and then you could move on your bike or as a pedestrian through this whole area. The plaza would connect into Stonefield at grade. You could move in and out of buildings. You could do 1- or 2-story buildings where you could have entrances on 1 or 2 levels. There would be a grade change here, so you could have some large stairs. It could be stairs and seating that would move you from the west side to the east side. So you would have an upper plaza at this deck level. You'd have a lower plaza that's basically at the Kmart level. All of the tan buildings would be new buildings. The gray buildings generally existing. So you could start to create some really neat spaces in this area and the ability to move all across here without ever interacting with traffic.
Sal, before you leave that, how many lanes of 29?
This does not propose that because the question is going to be, and that's going to be a more detailed question, is if we're losing turning movements, if we're going to limit turning movements, then Paul's going to have to tell us how many lanes it needs to be. So I'm allocating enough room for it, but at this point I'm not suggesting laneage on it. We just haven't got to that detail yet. But the room is allocated there, assuming that maybe that gets to be a skinnier section if we're losing turn lanes.
Well, the reason I bring that up, you remember last time Kathy talked about breaking buildings up. So
Yes.
the area that
Yes.
we would reclaim with that scenario.
Yes, and I think that's a great point. I think graphically, as we start to get that input, we keep conceptually moving the buildings tighter and tighter. And what happens when you do that is bridges and roads and these kind of features, they start to feel just like integrated urban streets. And they don't feel like there's something different or otherly or a big gap. But if you're on this upper deck and you bring those buildings closer, I mean, this really just starts to feel like you're in a nice urban mixed-use environment. And then that was the character sketch we had last time of that environment over. This transition here would be some steps. I mean, you could see it could be a water wall, it could be terraced landscaping. There's a lot of opportunity to play with that, where you move from the elevation above down to the essentially where the Kmart site elevations today. So 3 is the park bridge or land bridge, and I think we conceptually had it drawn here last time. It really works here from a topographic standpoint, but from a land use standpoint, urban farmland standpoint, it really has some real potential here as well to do a lot of things. So this is Zan, roughly where the existing roundabout is today on the Hillsdale project. And so you can see this is falling essentially where the parking lot is today and in line with the green space that's part of Stonefield. So it's moving through the parking area. The property line for Sperry is just to the north of that. And so what you're going to see in the concept is, I mean, this could be accomplished today without moving anybody out of the building. So you could look at long-term framework improvements, but there's in a lot of ways this thing could be accomplished today all these folks staying right where they are in the near term. And then the character sketch will show you some more of what that feature could look like. In this concept, this is a bridge 29 under, at grade 29 in hydraulic, which means we have to, from a transportation standpoint, begin to look at improvements, limiting turning movements, and improving the operations here. But again, we're going to start relying more heavily on this parallel network. So this is a new sketch, and I just thought just to have the conversation, it was helpful to start looking at some massing diagrams. Ultimately, we're going to get to a study like this for the core area as part of our scope. So I jumped ahead on that a little bit just to start to get a feel for what would that land bridge look like and how does it affect lanes on either side. So again, on the west side, if you ignore the proposed green space, and this proposed could be a parking structure here, then the Sperry site should stay as is. We don't want to change anything. This is the green space today in Stonefield. That could remain as a green space, and it will be at the end of this long spine where you have a green spine that would go east to west, county to city, all the way over to the green space on the far east side. In the long term, if things start to move around, then it would be kind of nice to have that green space on an axis here through Stonefield and have it on the long axis here. And now start to get more building massing. Again, we're talking as much as we can doing structured parking, wrap products, trying to eat up some of the surface parking. And now you look at just kind of the urban form, and it starts to feel, I think, pretty nice. The tan buildings are all infill, and now you start to get sort of this density and structure, and really a pretty amazing potential for this long green spine, which could be, from a pedestrian and biking standpoint, pretty significant. You can take parts of it and shut it down for program events and activities. All the gray buildings are existing today. So you see a lot of it is, could potentially worked into that overall structure. But this, I think, kind of gives an idea. This, again, is the Hillsdale roundabout here. The idea that maybe this becomes more of mixed use, again, depending on retail demand, that we can start to bring the mixed-use residential products more up into from the western edge, eastern edge into the core of the site. But the core retail would still remain here in this zone. Certainly some more mixed-use opportunities. But if you think about the idea of having view shed and desire lines from green to green, from east to west, across Mickey up the hill, maybe residential product that now is facing into the green area. If you have residential on the east side looking over the natural area, maybe you have the same facing you the other way. This is starting to be a pretty dynamic area. Open spaces, new gathering spaces on the east side, gathering spaces on the west side. Starts to really knit the whole thing together. It seems like there's a lot of potential exciting things that could happen in that location.
Now, when you design that, are you looking at a two-dimensional picture or are you looking at a three-dimensional picture?
Well, we always do both. So we're taking into account some topography and grade changes.
30 feet of drop.
Yeah, if you look at this, I've got about a 6% grade from here to here, which is certainly acceptable.
Not concerned about that,
Yeah.
but from that point south down to Meadow Creek, if you get behind those buildings, it's 30 feet back.
When you get back here, there's a lot. So the grade change is all happening right in here.
Right.
Yeah, it's right in here. So I'm not jumping the hill there. Yeah. No, you're correct. And that's why that green is in there. That's a big grade change right there. Yeah. So the visual to the green here is more visual. It's not,
okay.
You're not driving there or navigating out by car. Yeah, I think, again, it's just maybe give you a better image of how that might play out.
Is there any reason why you couldn't actually put more building mass around the roundabout?
No, I think you can. So in this case, Kat, I was trying not to undo everything. So, for example, this could become a whole new building mass here as it continues to redevelop. And so, again, when you set up the framework, then all of a sudden the other things can occur. I didn't want to wipe out all the existing buildings in this case to show how, we talk about an iterative process, how do you get to the end? And this is an example of, working within some of the existing buildings, but I would certainly see if you got momentum on a project like this, that this would start to redevelop and intensify, probably these spaces. But it starts to feel a lot better in terms of how you set up your public realm and streetscape, just by adding a few buildings, here and there. This was the idea of the parking decks, that are actually along 29, and the idea that we have really big green shoulders on 29, so you actually can move up 29 this way and that way, and we're not orienting buildings toward 29. And that was the previous concept, if you're standing on that land bridge, which is. And then these are images, I think, that are, there's dollars associated with them that are fairly realistic when you do these type of land bridges or park bridges. You can shut them down from time to time and then do program events on them. You can make them really, really functional spaces, still bring traffic across. But I think the exciting part could be that just extensive network of green that connects east to west and provides a lot of opportunities. And then in this case, I dropped the stormwater, and again, here's a case where, what if you wanted to do a water feature central? Now it would make sense because now you would be right at the end of this green spine, and it could be at the bottom where it wants to be outside of the conservation area, but where all the water is going. So 3A was the new one that came out of our brainstorming with Paul and his group. And essentially, it's what we just saw on that crossing above 29 and Zan. And then the idea was do a similar crossing down at Angus. And the idea again is as traffic starts to move elsewhere, as we limit movements on 29 and hydraulic, if we go that direction, then the parallel network becomes more important and more pressured on this intersection. So what if you could move freely along from Hillsdale extended all the way through Angus and then again to other points and destinations. Now, from an operational standpoint, you're really kind of moving traffic through here pretty well, limiting turn movements here, which helps that intersection operation. Just an idea of, again, giving us a second option for getting across for pedestrians and bicyclists as well. So now you've got two locations. Let's say we can do good things at that intersection. You've got 1, 2, 3 good places, safe places for pedestrians and bicyclists to cross. So essentially, we took that one idea, replicated it down here, just to give another option. And once we get into rubrics and start evaluating how things operate, we can start to see what impact this one move would have in terms of helping traffic operations on the whole network.
So if you can stay on this slide for just a second. One of the things we've been hearing through this panel and then some of the other groups that we've been talking to is neighborhood connectivity. And I think this is a good example of how you can connect the southwest quadrant, that's city, county, depending on where you live in the neighborhood, to the southeast quadrant and the northeast quadrant. So you really connect tying at a minimum 3, if not all 4, of the quadrants together in some of the residential areas and how they access and how easily they access and what modes of transportation they use to access the shopping areas. Just want to point that out.
I would be remiss if I didn't also point out that, and I think some of us have gotten concerns expressed by residents in the Meadows, what will be the volume changes on Cedar and Angus on all these options compared to today? And then what can we do to make sure that those are safe, walkable streets and not freeways? I think there was a real concern based on the nomenclature that was used last time, they called them thoroughfares. I see now they're calling them collectors, which might mitigate the situation a bit, but that's one thing we need to watch and figure out how to communicate well, and describe the section, all that.
And that's a good comment. So one of the things that will happen in the world between the transportation folks and the planner folks is this idea of here's cars, here's volumes, here's how much capacity we need or we have on the street, and then the planner side saying, well, here's what we want that street to look like. And maybe we want a nice 2-lane or 4-lane divided street. And then there's this back and forth of, okay, that could work, or there's no way we can handle, and there's that back and forth, because this has to do with neighborhood character.
Yeah.
If Paul says, I need 8 lanes of traffic there, we're going to say, no, thank you. If we can make it nicely landscaped or put a median in it and still make the traffic work, then that's my job to push that way and say, can we make this happen? And so that's the back and forth iterative process for planning and transportation. But you're right, and we're being, as transparent as we can as, talking about the network that is right now in legacy residential neighborhoods. We're going to have to think about the street typologies because they're going to potentially, likely have to change. Doesn't mean they have to be bad, but it also means, and it doesn't mean these residential areas become non-residential. It means that perhaps they just become different in form. Maybe it's different housing types, maybe it's different density, maybe the way they address the street is different. But you can see in this quadrant and here where we've got a lot of multifamily up here today, well, maybe it's just a different form of how we organize a multifamily along a nice street. So you have nice public realm, nice public streets. It's still multifamily, but as it redevelops, it looks different. It's not, yes, it's changing the character, but in truth, we could probably improve walkability and bikeability in these neighborhoods with better streets. So that's really where we're going to go as we move forward and we get more detail on the transportation conversation. It's now also going to be very much hand in hand. Okay, what do the streets need to look like? What do we want them to look like? And at some point, we've got to calm streets, do traffic calming through these residential neighborhoods, do it in a way that we can still handle traffic. Whether these are roundabouts or not, that's one way of dealing with, traffic operations in these areas. But we certainly want to have the streets as minimal in terms of section as we can, but still understanding that if we're creating more of a network of people traveling around now in this fashion, then the streets as they are today may need to change.
I've also got, we've been hearing the same thing, and we've got another week with Meadows coming up, and just kicking around the offices. One concern is that change of character, though, because a lot of, especially Cedar Hill and the multifamily, are lower income. Cedar Hill is lower income, single family, and that change of character may trigger an environmental justice issue that then limits what we can do federally. A fine line.
It is,
with that character change.
But also, I always tell people that sometimes when we're talking change of character here, we're talking improving the public realm. We're talking better streets with better streetscapes, complete streets.
But if that better street divides that neighborhood,
that's right. So I mean,
you're on a fine line.
Yeah, sort of the default perception is now you put the highway through my neighborhood.
And it
What if we
segregates one part of
Right.
the street from the
But
other.
what if it's just a nicer street with nicer sidewalks and nicer bike facilities and so yeah, we know that's absolutely a concern and an issue. But we also know if we make improvements here, the kind of improvements that we make for operations, traffic has to go somewhere. And so that's the conversation.
So I guess all these scenarios they'll check out the volumes and the numbers with all of these will be slightly different. One will
Yes.
disperse more than the others.
Yes.
Maybe they'll all be the same. They'll be interesting.
Paul's doing that in his head right now.
Oh yeah, I can feel it. It's like I can feel the heat.
So that's really the end of the framework conversation before Paul does his thing. So.
Did you take the heat off of Kathy's back?
Yeah.
So, now you can stare at
Yeah,
no
right.
real comments or
We
questions
can turn the
about
lights off.
what we saw today? I mean, this was a lot of recapping of what we saw in the last meeting, but with a little bit different angle here, a change to concept 3, moving that land deck south. So now you're kind of in between Seminole Court and hydraulic. It changes the character of walkability, not only that, but also access. And then 3A, when you start talking about grade separating angles, how that affects neighborhoods and how that affects traffic. Yeah, excuse me.
On all of these plans, all of them seem to contemplate minimizing the movements on hydraulic road. Is that true? Or is that like reducing movements on hydraulic road?
Not necessarily. I think it has to do with access to 29 or no access to 29. Does that occur at hydraulic? The result may be possibly a minimization of traffic on hydraulic, but not necessarily, that's not the purpose.
Yeah, it could be if hydraulic and 29 are grade separated or at grade, but turns are limited, and somehow maybe the hydraulic traffic is a little bit less right around here. but maybe not a block away. So by the time you get to the edge of the frame here, it's probably back to where it was as you leave this area.
And right now, we have a stoplight at 29 hydraulic, obviously. If it's grade separated and there's no stop condition, maybe the same amount of traffic flows through here, just much more efficient.
I was just thinking, like, what happened in Rio seems to have worked so well with traffic throughput being, you know, I mean, I've used that road all the time. It works great, but at the same time, the movements at Rio have been preserved so that the access points are all, you can still get everywhere you need to go before the GSI was implemented. Has any thought like that been contemplated for this, so that the movements are preserved, and it seems like a win-win from both sides? Because if you look at Rio, I think it's a pretty good success story. Unless I'm missing something, but I guess why wouldn't something similar have been reviewed for hydraulic?
Well, couple of things. The at-grade option, so we're looking at, Sal's looking at a 40, 50-year timeline to get to that goal. It doesn't necessarily mean that year one, we're eliminating alternatives. That may be 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So we just don't know. I mean, a lot of it depends on how much traffic is generated, where it's generated, origin, destination. The other thing is, if you take a GSI, just like Ryder, you pick it up and you move it down and drop it in hydraulic, there's some serious operational issues because it's so close to the interchange, 29 and 250. So if you have about 930 feet between the end of the ramp, so to speak, of a GSI and the beginning of the ramp at Best Buy. And the local traffic wants to be on the right to access businesses. The through traffic wants to be on the depressed lanes. And they all have to weave, not just a one-way weave, but a two-way weave, because the through traffic wants to get to 250 or 250 bypass. The local traffic wants to get toward Barracks Road. So there's a major operational issue there. While we haven't spent a lot of time looking at it specifically at GSI, but that doesn't mean we can't look at other potential grade separations. Kind of one of the things here is I view this in some ways as an interchange with dislocated ramps. Your street network is kind of acting as the ramps, your perimeter street network. Is that, would you change that?
Sure. And so the idea of turns at hydraulic is not off the table. We'll have to test all of that, and because we might find, as we drill down, as David said, and has said itself, we might find that we have to allow certain turns, all of them, half of them, whatever. You know, the numbers will speak to us.
Right.
Great, well, thank you. I'm Paul Prideaux. I know I've been mentioned a lot during these meetings, and it's very likely that at every future meeting I'll be presenting something. So my part has started now. So representing the transportation element, and Craig did say earlier, and he's right, that the travel demand is a direct function of land use. How much, what type, and where that land use wants to travel, where it wants to go. So that's a necessary, we need to get a little farther along, as Craig said, with that. But that doesn't mean there's nothing for me to say. And I thought this was a great opportunity to do kind of a warm-up or a primer, I called it a primer, about how do we approach this. So this is kind of the world from a transportation planner's standpoint. You notice I'm saying transportation and I'm saying travel. I'm not saying traffic because it's all modes. So there are three things I wanted to talk about. The framework for thinking, I guess probably could have used a different word because I know you've capitalized on that word. Framework for thinking about local and regional travel demand. I'll just talk about that for a few slides. And I'll tell you about some of the traffic counts we've done. Just to remind us, some people may be able to say, I know how many cars are on that road, but I've got some information that'll be interesting. And then we've talked a lot about disallowing turns and what that might mean to the local network. So I'll mention some of that too. All right, framework for thinking. This is our study area, no surprise there. So when we, as transportation planners, when we look at something like this, a small area plan, we can think all about the roads and the pedestrian infrastructure, but really the first way we start thinking about travel between zones, between areas. So like this is a map, I just made it up, okay? So we could look at our area in this way. These are not parcels, these are not land use types. There could be multiple land uses in this zone, but this is just a way of thinking, a way of thinking about travel. So we could say, all right, well, let's break down the area in these zones, and then let's calculate, report, talk about the travel between one and another. All right, so that's a very common way to deal with travel demand. A couple things I want to point out here. Whoops, I didn't do it. A couple things I wanted to point out is notice that some of these made-up zones have an I for internal. We think about kind of internal and external. And then these others with X's, or we could call them external. This is totally up to us. We can just make this up. So, but what I want you to notice is these external zones, what are there, 7 of them in this graphic? It's not just this real estate under that shape. It's and everything else. So when if I have a sheet of paper and I say 5,000 people a day want to go from X7 to I3. Well, X7, I mean, that's, what put that here, Lynchburg. I mean, this is that whole wedge that disappears off the page. So just keep that in mind. So if we did what we would call a trip table, oh, by the way, there's just kind of a cartoon example. In reality, that's what's going to happen every given day. Some people will make movements within a zone. Some people will go to adjacent zones. Some people will not even stop on the paper. And that's real. That's real. And so then we can think about, if we look at the area as trip making in zones, then we have a trip table. So origins and destinations, and those are all those same I1, I2. Okay, so that's a big complex table, and that's a huge lift to slice this area so finely. So that's probably too much for us to accomplish with the kind of precision that we're going to have in this study. But I did say it's quite possible that on any given day, every box will have some level of multimodal travel demand. That's fairly possible. And also notice that if you, from high school math, the main diagonal of the matrix is kind of shaded a little bit. You can see it. People can move, and they do all the time, within a zone to within a zone. We hope they're not, in those shaded zones, hopefully they're not doing that in a car. So this is probably a more realistic, attainable answer to this question about travel. And these shapes can change, and there can be a few more or one less or something, but this is probably more realistic. A couple of internal zones, and then the big external zone. Same concept applies. So if we, not if, we will populate information like this. It's a more manageable trip table. So at some point, I'll probably be standing up here and saying, here's the trip table. You remember me talking about it back in June, and look at the existing or future travel demand, and then we can stare at that map that's below it and say, really, wow, I had no idea that from X4 to I1 today or in 40 years, there'll be this much and it'll change this. So I think that's going to be part of our conversation. So I don't have those answers today, but I have my people working on it. We're going to be probably at our next meeting, or maybe the next at the latest. I will have those answers for existing travel. So there's one more thing here.
Just a point of clarification, when you say travel, you mentioned it's not vehicles. So travel is really person trips.
Yeah.
Either by foot, bicycle, transit.
Right. Yeah,
private vehicle.
That's right. So that's going to be a combination, I think I mentioned it here, the combination of sources. There is a very robust source of information that's called Streetlight, which is the branded name of the company that provides data based on GPS, pings from vehicles, that we can get very accurate data about vehicle movements in that trip table. And when we get to pedestrian and bike and transit, we'll have to go to other sources. Now, all that, everything I've just talked about is for existing, for today. Now, we would want to, it's only really meaningful if we also report it in the future, maybe for some of those scenarios. So we have tools for that too. And I say in the second paragraph, future trip making demand can also be estimated through a series of modeling exercises, professional judgment. There will be some assumptions in our future about what percentage of traffic is internal capture or accomplished through active transportation. So these activities are planned as we get further into phase 2. So this is just kind of a sneak peek. We will be speaking to you, with you, about in this type of context. It's just one thing. All right, here's some information that came out of some traffic counts that we did. We did these before school was out on purpose. So we've got just tons of information. I just picked a few things that I thought were interesting. These are some ADTs, average daily traffic. That's 24 hours a day. Traffic count from April, a few months ago, in these 3 locations, 2 directions. So 6 locations if you count each direction. So just, nothing right or wrong about this. It's just information. It's something we always start with to get a sense. So about 11,000 vehicles per day. And these are vehicles, in this case, because it's a traffic intersection count. About 11,000 vehicles per day in each direction on hydraulic, and more, as you know, this triangle down here, more on this side, and about 30 to 32,000 per day on 29 at this location every day now, for a total of over 60. So not right or wrong, just is what it is. A person could look at 1990 data and say, wow. So that's just information. Here's another thing that I think is interesting. We did intersection counts, like who's turning left, who's turning right, at all these locations, also a few months ago. So I picked a few, just because we've talked a lot in this group about turns and who gets to make a turn and who can't. So in this, I just picked 4 locations: hydraulic and 29, Greenbrier, Georgetown and hydraulic, and down here at the bypass. I just picked those 4. We got all the information. But here's what I did with these little graphs. I said, all right, let's say for this intersection, number 6 here, if I added up this is for the PM, 3 hours in the afternoon during a weekday, so 3 hours. If I took all the through movements, people going back and forth on hydraulic, people going back and forth on 29, added it up, 12,000 of those vehicles doing that. Not right or wrong, that's just a thing. All the turns, because we keep talking about turns, and all the turns added up together, all the rights, all the lefts, on all approaches, about half. It's not, that's a lot of turns, it's just a thing. So when we say, just allow the turns, all right, well, that's fine, then you probably need to think, we're going to take that stack and we're kind of sprinkle it around everywhere else. So our job is to figure out who's going to, what we wouldn't want to happen is all of that appears, right here. Or on the next. So we need to, with design and a well-planned grid and hierarchy of routes and whatever, we need to, or moving people to different modes, we need to figure out how, if we just take that away, where does it pop up, and are we going to be careful what you ask for situation. So that's our job. So, down here at the bypass and hydraulic, you've got just almost an equal amount of turns and through movements. And then look up at Georgetown and hydraulic, and part of the reason why the turns are greater than the throughs is because it's a T intersection basically. And so a movement from Georgetown to hydraulic would be considered a turn. So when we think about, yes sir.
Sure. I assume this must be the case, but for the turn column,
yes.
I'm assuming you've got the individual turns that comprise that.
Have it all. Have it all. And by 15-minute FT times.
One other question, real quick, just so I understand it, everybody else understands. This is the aggregate of all approaches to the intersection.
It is.
So it's not just 250 at hydraulic, traffic on 250 also.
Yeah, I could have made this, 4 or 8 little bars stacked up. So yes, it's all there. Tremendous detail.
Let me bring up a tangential point for those of us that watch traffic counts.
Yes.
The last traffic count I saw hydraulic in 29 with 58,000 vehicles a day. That was last June, I believe. That's a big increase. How do you, if you go back and look at prior years, it was sort of in that same area. One time it got up as high as 60,000, but I guess decisions are going to be made based on accuracy. So somehow or other you need to be able to explain.
Was that combined both directions?
I'm sorry?
Was that combined both directions?
Yeah, yes.
Because combined both directions, this is still 60,000.
If you're talking about
Can
29.
you go back and show the
Yep.
location?
For this?
So this is north of the intersection.
Yes.
And with what we just saw, that almost half, well, I guess it would be roughly a third of that traffic is actually turning at hydraulic. So the 60,000 may represent through.
Well, get a big long discussion, but VDOT prints a big, thick manual of traffic on segments, and I'd like to see you look at that.
Historic.
Between the northern city line and the bypass, northern city line and hydraulic road. Those are the ones that I'm most interested in. And these counts are higher, and that's fine, whatever they are. Just be in a position to explain the differences.
Yeah. Well said.
And I'll tell you now, that we may be in a situation where we can't explain the difference. We don't know why it's different. We may have just been at a point in the year where it was higher or lower. It may not be. It's a snapshot in time. So we know that.
Chuck, you had a question?
Well, the only other thing I wanted to say was that count could be taken anywhere on that corridor from
The one in the
city
book.
line to Riot Road,
The one in the book you're talking
the
about?
one that's in the book. So I don't know exactly, I can find out where they took the count.
We were closer to 60,000 on the drive.
Yeah. So I'm,
There is one from hydraulic to the city line, which is what those would be.
well, the city line is at hydraulic.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the one at the north end at
Post office, it'll go.
off the
So you're right, there's a lot of data out there, and so we'll be ready to be intelligent about that. Okay, so, but as far as volume changes and evolution over time, this 30,000, that's a combination of someone going from, it's not on this graphic, but, Culpeper or something to Lynchburg, and it's people that are stopping right here. That's all the, and it's someone only driving within this frame. So it's all of those mixed, and that's one thing that street light data I talk about will shed light on. It's a commonly debated subject. All right, so we've talked a lot about turns, and left turns are really the biggest challenge. Right turns are kind of benign. They do affect an intersection's performance, but they're not nearly as bad as lefts. If you think about lefts, everyone kind of has to stop while they go, where rights can kind of flow. So I did another little thing here. Again, this is very high level. All the details are there. This is the red represents what proportion of the turns are lefts. So about half. About half of the turns are lefts. So if we had an intersection, we said, no more left turns, stop it. Then, all right, then the red needs to be accomplished some other way. And but with the grid system, it doesn't all have to go to the very next intersection. There are other ways. So that's the next thing we'll talk about. So
Those are southbound lefts?
that's all lefts. In the way I did this, I could have done something different. The way I did this, those are all, if it's a four-legged intersection, it's 4 different left turn modes to make it. Okay. So no conclusions from any of that. It's just information, the types of things that we use to get us formed up. So if the street network is revised to correspond to a significant redevelopment and the decision is made to disallow turns at an intersection such as hydraulic 29, vehicles will need to modify routing to reach their destination. That's not hard to understand. So here's a real simple made-up grid. This is not our study area. But right now, in this Smithfield town, if a person wants to travel from the origin to the destination, from the triangle to the star, if it's just a kind of a regular grid, everybody can turn any which way they want. They might do what's shown with the red arrow, very traditional. So what if we say, all right, that's it, you're not doing that anymore. You can go through here, but you can't turn there, so they're going to have to do something else. So they've got multiple choices. That same traveler, they can make a right and a left and a left. They could stay through and then do a quadrant turn. They could make an earlier left. The point is, redundancy, great concept. So, and we talked about it earlier during the meeting, that that could have undesirable consequences if that yellow arrow appears where we don't want it to. So some of that can be affected by the street typology, the design of the roadway, traffic calming, things like that. So we're very aware of that. and that's our job is to report how that, but the whole objective, hopefully, when we do it right, is that those turns will be diffused into multiple paths instead of all just appearing one other place, and we just reset the problem somewhere else. So if we did disallow turns of hydraulic, because of the concept on the previous page, these may be links that would be used to accomplish those movements. And the modeling we would do, will help us answer that. But, we talked about this earlier, right? So we haven't modeled it to say, yes, it will carry the load of those turns. Not necessarily, it depends. It depends on how we set up the system. But that's an example where I mentioned earlier when I first stood up, there may just be a calming. You asked about hydraulic total volume, and there may just be a cooling off right here, make it work a little better, but it'll, by the time you get off the edge of the page, I said, you're back to the same command. So there's just an example. You notice I kind of picked the more significant roadways in many cases instead of kind of the minor interior roads, but that's all speculation. So our job would be to test and model that and validate it. So,
Paul, a question on your analysis methodology. Is one of your first steps to kind of understand what the desire lines are based on your street light data? You're going to say this many people want to go from here to here, and you know where they want to travel, or the shortest path, or the shortest travel time from the origin to the destination. Do you start with what I call like a desire line, and then you start to fracture it to meet the road typology?
Yeah, so to get the ultimate future travel demand, it's going to be like building layers like plywood or a sandwich or something. So first off, those X's to X's, I mean, we can't control those people. They're making their decisions 2 counties away. And so first things first is to get that. That's the first piece of that laminate, right? And then we take not the counts, not even the existing land use, the future land use, and we figure out how much travel demand that land use is asking for. And that all appears, let's say, in these eyes. And then we layer that on top, and that has desire lines. And then we will build the story and say, all right, with the background and the through traffic and the local internal and external internal traffic, we build it up until this is the demand in the orientation, and we assign it to the different transportation facilities, whether it's a bike trail or a transit line or highway or roadway. So does that answer your question? So it is a combination of sources. Almost done here. Okay. We did that. Okay, just 4 takeaways. Things that I've kind of said. 4 takeaways of what I've been saying today. Existing and future travel demand will be discussed in terms of long distance through travel as well as local trip making. So it's both. We have to carry the water for both in this work. Existing traffic counts have value. They do have value, but pretty quickly we have to move offline and get to forecasted, predicted, because we're talking about a very big change in this area, not just a tweak. So existing counts have value to the study process, but the type and intensity of future land use will directly impact mode, magnitude, and directionality of travel. If we put county soccer fields out there, everyone might be headed north and south from this area. If we put, so that all that matters. So that's why, thank you for the little bit of reprieve on answering all the questions that we don't know any questions yet. Proportion of left turns at intersections have significant impacts on overall operational. That doesn't mean they're bad. It just means if we can do something about them, that's good. We're going to try. Last thing, I'm done. And strategically prohibiting problematic turns at select intersections can be mitigated with good network design, such as a grid system and use of quadrant turns and typology. So there are ways to control people's behavior with the way we build and assemble the land use and the way that we offer the transportation network. So there's the primer, the 101, to get us warmed up on this subject. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, we're on to the next subject.
You have, I think this is fascinating, but and I'm sure it's been done. Is there an example of a small study area somewhere else that designated the turns and created the collectors and
Sure,
street
certainly.
sweepers?
There are. I can look for some, find some. Yeah, it's very common. I'm looking at Chuck, I know he's nodding over there. It's case by case. You can't paint it with a big brush, and anywhere you do it, it's good. It depends. It depends. But it can be,
I
it
think it'd
can
be
work.
helpful on the street.
A case study, I mean, what happened in the neighborhood, the collector?
Well, I think it's something we can present at the next meeting on the 22nd.
Absolutely. I can, yeah.
You know, here's
So
the
before and afters, and just gonna be
Right. kind of what the end result was, the impact.
Yeah. Just
Especially the shopping center, the intersection.
I'm with you.
And I'm looking at those.
Well, you have to have
areas
that to
have
do a
residential.
case study,
I
right?
understand. So just take it with a grain of salt, because all politics are local, and also the sensitivities are all unique to every location. But yes, we'll find a couple of them and show them.
What was the source of your, or what is the source of your origin destination?
So there are two ways to answer a good question about OND. One is to, for existing conditions, it's called street, what we're going to use is called street light. 20 years ago, you do license plate matching, right, or travel surveys or something, or you stop people at the light, where are you going, you know? But things, yeah, I've done it.
We've got some
With the
people
best.
that will do that for you out on that same.
I'm not gonna touch that.
A little cash.
Showing flowers. But things have gotten a lot better. They really have. So with non-invasive, remote sensing and private serial numbers of GPS and phones moving around, you can, and I've got some great presentation. I can do a presentation about streetlight. It's really cool. Thousands and thousands of little dots moving is the way the satellites see this stuff. And so we can get.
So you've already collected that?
It's been collected. All we have to do is use a web-based tool to go in and query it.
All right.
That's cool.
One question, not question, point that I brought up in an earlier meeting. We talk about hydraulic in 29, but we really need to also be talking about the bypass, because what you do in hydraulic in 29 is going to have a real impact on what happens to the bypass.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the ramifications of doing something here. It's interesting because if you remove the turns, this actually, under my pen, or longer than that, will function a lot better, and that might make it easier for the through trip. And more people may come back.
It is until you get to the bottleneck at Best Buy.
Absolutely. Yep, I know.
Well, the bottleneck at Best Buy or the Angus signal?
Well, it's the bottleneck that's created by two lanes going up there trying to merge once you get up to the top, between the top of the ramp and the Barrett Road exit, where you do have this kind of cross movement going on that was discussed earlier.
Well, a lot of that was alleviated as a result of the construction.
Will be alleviated by.
Was alleviated by the construction of the Best Buy ramp project.
I don't think it has been in real life. In real life, there's a lot of cross movement going on, and if you funnel people past hydraulic faster, so there's not a queue that like a caravan stops to give the traffic that's coming up Best Buy ramp a chance to get onto, excuse me, the 250 bypass. I think we just ought to be looking at what impact getting rid of that stoplight at hydraulic southbound would have on the 250 bypass.
I agree, we need to look at that. I think that's the first time that I've heard that problem has not gotten better at that interchange, to be quite honest with you.
VDOT has been talking since at least 1995 about the challenge with dealing with the hydraulic 29 intersection and the impact that it'll have on the 250 bypass. And it's said, maybe not in the last 2 years, repeatedly, that you can't fix hydraulic without fixing the bypass.
Correct. But we've already had a major implementation at the interchange in front of Best Buy, which.
I agree it's helped. I agree.
So one of the things
it
that
needs to be considered. it tells you there's a problem at the top of that ramp.
Yes, sir.
So I'm curious to know, as we talk about land use, and maybe trend between you and Sal, are there certain inputs that, in terms of land use inputs into the I zone, that have a mixture of jobs and residences in terms of their proportion and their relation to each other that would affect your models?
Yes,
for
absolutely.
well,
Yes, our job will be to carve out that amount of travel. And it's going to be professional judgment. Maybe we'll talk about it as a group right here, but is it 14% or whatever? We will figure. Well, yes.
There's an infinite number of combinations that you can test, so there's,
but I guess in terms of a model, is there some yardstick that says 5,000 jobs and 15,000 residences is this kind of nice mix of people won't jump in their cars to
Jobs, housing, ratio.
whatever it is? Yeah, I don't know. But you see the point?
Kind of a sweet spot, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll that's maybe a little bit more on this side, but we'll work together on it.
But to your point, it depends on the ultimate mix.
Yeah.
And in the mixed use environment, you're not trying to nail that number, X number of square feet of this, X number of square feet of that exactly. But Paul's got to have something plugged into his model. So we look at sort of an ultimate build out. We'll have to make some assumptions in what number of units we're talking about. And then the driving habits based on the ultimate form, the ultimate build out of the area, based on a preferred framework, the more the driving habits look like, how do they move in and out of that.
Just driving habits, but transit habits.
mode split. Which mode are you going to take?
Changing the mode. I mean, it's scary territory, but my independent Google searches led me to some research at the University of Chicago or something, so you can tell that I was way off line from where I needed to be. But it started talking about relative densities, and when people would have densities, and either job density or housing density, they would begin to not choose to get in the car.
Right.
Right, that's right.
Yep.
And I don't know where those are in our area.
Or choose to take transit.
Or choose.
That's
Right.
right.
So that's why, a new transit facility like the light rail in Charlotte can change your development patterns overnight. Because now it can handle density along that line. If people are stepping out the door and getting on transit.
Boston and Arlington is a great example of that too.
So as we start to talk about land use and the framework that you've laid out, it's that kind of intensity that would be interesting to know.
So that would be,
where to practice on.
so the idea would be, could we test out a scenario before we kind of chuck a certain land use, residential jobs mix, throw in what would happen if we had a VRT line, 29, and how that would help. Because I know in the Places 29 study years ago, there was that notion of having VRT and circulator trolleys at different nodes.
The interesting thing that you mentioned is that's what I've been thinking about lately is you're not getting to Places 29 without these big ideas. And that's what leads to that location. So, right now, bus rapid transit doesn't make sense.
It doesn't now, but it's
Right.
later.
So I think that's why this is an iterative process where we're going to have to test out these scenarios.
Any other questions for me? Thank you. We'll keep talking every time.
Thanks, Paul. Chip, do you want to give us an update on that?
Chip already got this stuff together.
Hey, Chip,
Not at all. You
don't
have it
give
in
us the
your
update on this. Chip, please.
Please, Stacy. I went ahead and put together or gathered some of the information that we had. Just to give an update, I guess we'll kind of do this every meeting. Well, I guess up till the next meeting, because that's when we've kind of drawn the line as to when we'll kind of stop meeting with these neighborhood groups unless we get some other requests. So that's in our time frame. We have had 2 neighborhood meetings so far. We've had one with the Greenbrier neighborhood, and we had one at the senior center 2 days ago. Very good meetings. Quite honestly, I was maybe hoping for a few more people. I think we had 10 at Greenbrier and a few more than that at the senior center, but they were very interesting discussions. We do have another one coming up on June 20th at 6:30 in the evening at the Holiday Inn. And as of right now, I do not believe that an IRC meeting has been nailed down yet? Still on hold? Okay. So we heard some interesting things. Just sum it all up, we heard a lot of the same things that have been said in the community. Pedestrians, access is important, crossing 29 is a barrier. We need more bike paths, we need more trails, we need more green space, we need to connect the green spaces. So I'll pull out a few that I thought were either significant discussions during those meetings or things that we haven't quite heard yet in other locations. So from the Greenbrier meeting, there was a lot of focus on lighting. You know, whatever this area of the small area plan should be well lit, especially at night, so that people feel safe. The discussion about senior housing. Now, this came up at the Greenbrier meeting, not the one at the senior center. Where is there going to be senior housing here? Is it going to be within this area? Is it going to be on Hillsdale, where a lot of it is now? I think at the senior center meeting, they called it senior housing. Improving access to neighborhoods for residents, including Brandywine Drive, Mickey Drive, hydraulic 250 intersection. So there was a lot of discussion about that at the Greenbrier meeting. So I figured it was worth mentioning to you that that is a topic of interest for that neighborhood. Big ideas, using the Meadow Creek natural area as a green space with off-road walking and bicycle facilities to that area. And we can certainly put all this together and put it on our website so everybody has access to it. There was the idea of potentially a museum somewhere in the 29 hydraulic area. No real detail as to, we're talking a small museum or nothing about that, just an idea of stone. I mentioned to Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen. So I'm not real familiar with it. I have to go look it up myself. But, I mean, we're talking big ideas.
That's really out of the box.
Yeah. We did talk about their thoughts on building height in 5 to 6 stories seemed appropriate, which I think is consistent with what we discussed here.
That's great.
There was a discussion about relocating 29 below grade, below hydraulic, which is one of our concepts. Also just pointing out that there were a few people in this meeting that I think had been paying attention to what we've been doing here, but the vast majority of them, this is the first time they're seeing or hearing about this. So we really wanted to get a raw, what are your thoughts? We didn't show them much of anything, just talk through this. Concerns, some of the people said they had no, one individual stated that they would like not to have concerts in this area. There was a lot of concern about noise. I know there's been some concerts or outdoor shows.
Probably speak to that about the building.
Right. And that may change. This is one person's opinion, but they stated that they can kind of hear this going on all day long in their house. It starts to get a little old. There was an individual that expressed that they would like to see the large oaks near the Kroger property kept, not cut down. And interest in not having big box commercial per se within the new redevelopment area. Not that it can't happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully we will.
And we also had a discussion about potentially it could be there, but take it different, but not look like your traditional big lots. And affordable shopping, which we've heard here, but it was mentioned several times in that regard. So moving on to the meeting at the senior center, the first thing out of the box was out or up. And I thought that was a really good concept and a good way to get that meeting started. Should development occur outwardly, or should we start looking up? And so we're starting to see that same tendency of people thinking more openly about higher vertical elevations of these buildings. But then there was the expression of, what about solar panels? Which is kind of a new term to me, but I got it pretty quickly. Are you blocking the sun? So there's some concern about how high do we go before we start having that happen. One individual stated that there are too many hotels, and I think a couple of people agreed with that. Also, a person stated that there are too many vacant storefronts and questioned whether or not the government could kind of force developers to use existing storefronts before building new. We had a little discussion about about that, and that it probably wouldn't occur that way, but there may be ways for the local government to incentivize people to use existing space before building new. There was a consideration for underground shopping space with a comparison to Tokyo. We had a world traveler.
Simply ours is not good. Travel everywhere.
Yeah.
You want underground shopping?
Yeah. One individual stated that we should be thinking about topographic elevation when we're thinking about building height and not necessarily number of floors, which I think is a good point. Buildings that sit lower topographically.
Can be
taller.
high. Yeah, right.
One person expressed concerns that U-turns at 29 hydraulic are not safe for pedestrians. We talked about pedestrian safety, but I don't think we've nailed it down to U-turns as being problematic in this room. I think there was quite a bit of support for the use of roundabouts where possible. Good lighting, again, was mentioned. Pedestrian facilities are needed everywhere across major highways, and access should be improved to the Ivy Creek natural area. Not just access, but the actual physical trail to that area. Signing should be large enough and clear enough for the senior community.
They want people to walk from the hydraulic Hillsdale?
Well, this individual currently walks from the senior center to the Ivy Creek natural area. I would like to see some improvements in the trail system. She seemed well. So that's kind of just a summary of some of the new things that we've heard. These have been fantastic meetings. I was really surprised by the one at the senior center. It was very active, probably more so than the environment, and very forward-looking too, which I appreciate. So we will expect kind of a similar situation with the Meadows. I know they have some unique concerns, and we'll talk to them on the evening of the 20th. Any questions about the neighborhood meetings? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for that update.
I've got one comment, maybe with the
Yes.
IRC meeting, would it be possible to have some people with either Ann or Jonathan Cat there? Because I don't really have to use public transit a lot.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. I think we certainly can. But one of the things I forgot to include here that shocked me about the senior center meeting was we started talking about transit. And Chip asked the question, he said, who in the room here currently uses transit? And one person raised their hand. It was the youngest person by far in the room. It was a little bit shocking that people say they want transit, but aren't necessarily currently using it. So I think that's a pretty good sign. Either something needs to change or it needs to be more advantageous to use.
Better, it needs to, yeah. We have gaps. But we're working on it.
And again, you know, these meetings are gathered, these are listening to our meetings. So if there's some concern about some current or existing or future transit plan, I think it'd probably be good to get our information together and then get back to them with that.
Okay, thanks for that update, Dave. Before we get to the next agenda item, I just want to back up and ask Sal and Paul if you were looking for any input from the panel in order to progress with your work. We didn't really have a whole lot of discussion. We had some clarifying questions, but we didn't really talk strategically and about inputs that you might need. So I wanted to pause and ask you that question to see if that stimulates some discussion or some direction from the panel before we move on. Are you looking for anything from us today in order to progress your work?
My only thought would be if there's anything that's presented today, in combination with what we talked about before, that would have the will of the group say, let's narrow in one direction or another, or 2 out of 3, versus keeping all 3 concepts open on the table, then that's the kind of feedback we want. If that can occur today, fine, but we can start narrowing in the conversation. That's helpful.
Unfortunately, I thought that, last time we saw we couldn't narrow down on until we actually track the transportation.
That's correct, and that's when I asked the impossible, Paul.
Right.
But, I mean, I guess if there's a concept that nobody likes, this, we wouldn't even like to see this go. Then why bother studying it before, I guess is what we're getting at.
There was a lot of discussion at the last meeting about concept one not being tracked.
Yeah.
You came up, Kathy, made some suggestions on things they could do to show it, but nobody seems to, I don't recall anybody having a lot of enthusiasm for underground common areas.
Yeah, and concept one is 29 over hydraulic, which is kind of the natural topography. But does the group feel strongly about maybe not
Well, I think
progressing that?
maybe not necessarily so much the kind of the vertical positioning of the roads, it's just the idea that there would be an underground public space.
Right.
That's what I thought.
That was it. I don't think we
Yeah.
were wanting to take that transportation solution on the table, but we didn't think that that was the public space that we wanted.
Well, and since we're talking about land use here, I mean, that's what's going to generate the transportation study. So, I mean, if it's agreed that we're going to take that off the table, we can focus on keeping alternatives.
And for me, I would much rather focus on the more recent scenario of the two land bridges than having that underground feature with scenario one.
Well, I mean, could you have the underground feature but not spend all your money on a bond? But just have it be,
Right, so if that was deemed to be a better operational solution for the interchange, but the main public center of gravity happens somewhere else.
yes, that's what I mean. Yeah.
You still want to use it as a way to cross 29, so you still have bike and pedestrian.
Yes,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. It just wouldn't be, that's for,
Not a gathering space.
But it
you
wouldn't be
wouldn't put all your
focus.
resources to make that on public space.
Well, could you
Put a penalty bar.
Yeah. No, it's that underground shopping.
Riverwalk.
In Tokyo.
That's where the river was. That's where I remember.
That means we're gonna have to have 20-story towers there.
But you can compete with the gathering.
So are we ready as a panel to say, you don't necessarily need to progress concept one and narrow down some of the work that Sal and Paul need to do?
The land use, I think we're still saying we want to see the transportation piece, but we
I kind of
don't.
like the idea of hydraulic under. I'd like to see that fleshed out a little bit more, but again, that's probably not the best place for the public space as an underground.
So, no, we looked at 3 and 3/8. There's no reason why hydraulic under 29 can't also be associated with those other options. I mean, that was an at-grade option.
Yeah.
So keep it as a transportation option, but
Keep-
not as a
absolutely,
gathering.
yes, that's the word, yes.
And realistically, Sal, the difference in the land use between 1 and 2 really doesn't make that much difference on transportation. It's just how you grade separate 29 and hydraulic, right? So the land use could be quite consistent, right?
And operationally, there may not be much difference either, depending on how you do access.
More of a style
Yes.
situation.
Okay, so nothing's off the table.
And cost too, you know, the engineering and the earthwork is, you know, we haven't talked a whole lot about that, but that's probably going to become very easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
eventually.
Well, I guess that is the question, is there one under over that makes more sense because it's so
So I think when we do the rubric next level, we'll have a cost component of that, relatively speaking, one's more expensive than the other.
Okay, very good.
Sal?
Yeah.
Just bring up one other thing. The limiting of the movements on hydraulic 29, just specifically thinking about the redevelopment of Kmart, is really concerning to me. I guess especially because I just found out from the city of Charlottesville 2 weeks ago that with the construction of Hillsdale Road, they're raising a concrete median down Hillsdale, which is going to restrict access to Whole Foods, which is a building that we own, and it's also going to restrict access in that Kmart, so that the entrance road off of Hillsdale, right adjacent to Gold's Gym, will become right in, right out. Apparently, this has been going on for a number of years, even though we own property on both sides of the road, nobody told us. And so, in thinking about the redevelopment of Kmart, one of the most important things in commercial development is being able to get there. And if you limit the access on 29, and then the access on Hillsdale is becoming limited now too, Kmart becomes a really easy place to drive by, but not get there. And I just want to make sure that all of these decisions are being coordinated. And so this, there's a really great redevelopment opportunity there. And it's going to be destroyed. You can't get to it. So that's, I guess, from where I come from, it's a big headline for us.
On Hillsdale?
Yeah.
What you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to schedule a meeting about that. I don't think why we consider it here, I think working with DOT, Department of Transportation, and also design engineers, they review that, and there's a safety issue in terms of the standard for trucks trying to go into Hillsdale. So we're scheduled to discuss that. We're going to be engineers to that. I don't think we have to solve that question. The site plan that was submitted, proposed and things like that, indicated this problem. It's on the site plan. So to say that you're not aware of that,
The site plan showed that the intersections could be modified in the future. That's all it said. I mean, we don't need to get into
Then it
details
was,
here. I'm just saying that these are transportation
there
issues.
is documentation about that. And then we have a thorough analysis from the design engineers regarding it. So we are looking at scheduling a meeting, contact you, and then we discuss that.
But Julie, no.
Yes.
Yeah, the landlocked.
Because if it's dealing with DOT, I mean, we've got the DOT people here,
Right.
so it might be that we need to bring in some of that issue.
But yeah, that's not a,
They're not in isolation.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood the differences in the scenarios in terms of where the public space would be as we consider maybe eliminating the choice. And so I'm going to say that there's a choice that the public space would be at the intersection of Hydraulic and 29 that kind of plays out in scenario 2. There's a choice that the public spaces would be on these land bridges kind of in 3A or 3A. And I think what I'm hearing is that in choice number 1, we don't think the public space should be at the intersection, but that idea would be a dispersed public
We
space.
had a public space on both east and west.
In the quadrants or
Yeah.
somewhere else, some other, that's what we're, it's a change from number 1, is what we're asking.
Yeah.
Just find another place for a better public space.
And I don't want to make it sound like there will be no other public spaces within the study area.
Right.
It's just the focus in combination with transportation and where the center of the universe sort of is. Again, if you think of an organizing principle and you go, okay, here's our money shot,
Yeah.
whether it's east side or west side or both, if it's a true organizing principle, it's important enough, then we work from there out. We're going to want pocket parks and connectivity throughout the whole area. But it's like, okay, if we can create that magazine cover, where do we want it to occur?
I think that's a good distinction, the fact that was the part we didn't like about
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question would be is, can a number 1 scenario actually find another place for the money shot?
Yes.
That makes sense,
Yes.
that's different from 2 and 3.
Yes.
Which we haven't seen yet, but.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay. So these are schedule of all the different meetings.
This was intended for the public meeting, so, we've had the initial meeting, which was our business leader meeting, and then on the next page, that was our target, the 22nd to the 22nd, May to June was our target for these neighborhood meetings. We've had the Greenbrier neighborhood meeting on the 30th, and Senior Center neighborhood meeting on the 6th, and the upcoming neighborhood meeting in Meadows on the 20th. That was the intent of the slides. So each meeting we're tracking these. So let's click on the draw. Right here.
And then, right now, it seems like we're pretty sure that we have Charlottesville High for the August 23rd meeting.
Charlottesville High School, August 23rd, okay.
There's their meeting schedule.
So we have time for this charrette on the 23rd and June 22nd. Did I see that?
No, I think we reserved the room from 6:30 or so, which I think was the time.
Talking about public information.
Public meeting on on August 23rd.
He's talking
So,
about.
yeah,
Oh,
He's talking about the second.
Second charrette.
June 23rd. This is good there.
Sure. Sounds right.
That's us. That's us, right?
June 23rd is,
Yeah.
Yes.
Coming right up.
It's the day after our next meeting.
I have 8:30.
It's gonna be that 8:30.
Just like it was before. 12 again?
Yeah, you guys set up for
8:30. Is that for us?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
us, 8:30 to 12:30 is what I have.
So a meeting on the 22nd,
Here.
and then come back on the 23rd for the charrette.
Yeah.
And is that one where planning commissions were going to be given the time to meet or participate? I know we had had the discussion and we never really.
I'm not sure that we
it's that-
settled on making them into that process.
So we got some clarification on the charrette to do. Okay. So, a review of the upcoming tasks. We talked about the charrette there, which will do the screening out on the 23rd. Then we'll get the inputs from the transportation, the external inputs, the X zones that Paul talked about in his introductory information in the middle of July. So now our guest speaker, Andrew Gasbray, is going to fill us in a little bit on the status of the Rio. Sorry, looking for the state. The Rio Small Area Plan. And we've got about 15 minutes for you to fill us in on the status.
Half hour to 15 minutes to 10, so I think we're going to all right. Overview of the Rio 29 process, and I want to, as Dave pointed out, you guys are following a very similar tack and similar planning principles, so I won't be repeating that. The point today, though, is to show how similar the processes are and how important working together will be in advising the future of what goes on. This is a repeat for a lot of people that have seen these kinds of things that are following the Route 29. The reason I'm talking about the code just as a background item, it really doesn't, we can talk about land use all we want, but without a view to how it actually gets implemented, you risk having a plan that sits on the shelf. And we certainly have a number of examples of that around the country at this time. So I just want to keep that in our view shed as to how we actually make this happen. And I think this is a good opportunity for dialogue between the two groups, because the same mechanisms, you know, if we find a good mechanism, it will apply to wherever we're trying to achieve these goals. So as I move forward,
It's getting faster.
okay. So phase one was basically what we did over the winter. It was a vision for sort of what you guys are calling a concept kind of idea, and that led us to a few conclusions we'll talk about in just a second. Okay, there we go. The phase two needs is where we are in March. The Board of Supervisors endorsed the vision. The next phase is going from that concept to actually concretizing the design. We came to the same conclusion that you all did, that you really can't model the transportation until you have some more specifics, and you can't do 100,000 permutations of that, or that would just be undoable in time and cost. So those will be going on in phase three, which is after we come to a preferred alternative. We'll be looking at transportation and economic modeling as a part of how you get this stuff to do, how to converge. And then finally, we are also going to talk about in this process, in our process for RIO, public engagement as well as the other factors that go on, and in this case, our consideration of what's going on in hydraulic, because that directly impacts what we're doing. So in the RIO 29 process, we organized, the organizing vision was no trans-oriented development. Whoa, went too fast. The box. I was just going to say that the overwhelming, even though we were organizing into different walkable nodes, we were focusing on this area, and that we were going to keep those other ones as a back pocket for much later. We didn't want to dilute the performance of the one node, important point, as we go forward. So phase 2, we were looking at RIO 29 intersection and how to have an implementation strategy that would make that actually happen. What's the strategy? Do we do a form-based code? Do we do a form-based code elements with a regular code? How do we actually get the landholders and the stakeholders involved in agreeing to do this? Because we don't, we can talk about it, but it doesn't necessarily make it happen. The other part is then the template, which we call the design area, where we actually get specifics about the design. How is this phased? How is this going to impact? Because we obviously don't have enough money to do everything at once. So all that becomes very critical. This may sound somewhat familiar to your process as well. So for where we are, we've gone through a number of alternatives, including the business as usual, with realistic numbers, not necessarily the numbers, but looking at what would be the scenarios that would be involved. And we came down to 3 choices. Now, how do you get that little pointer towards? Is it the top button or? Should be the little button. There we go. So, and we came to 3 alternatives that seemed by our charrette to be the most likely alternatives to explore. From this, we will come up with 1 alternative that we will flesh out in detail. So that happened from our charrette. This was the group 1 results, in which they talked about what the actual vibe or mission was for the particular smaller scale, in this case, a smaller scale design, what would be the amenities, what kind of land uses, and what would be the key features. 2 was slightly larger, with more amenities, a little bit different mix of land use and key features. And 3, where it actually has more of a kind of a county center kind of feel with larger scale amenities and different things associated with it. So that completed our phase 2, or that will lead to our being able to complete phase 2 and develop from those 3 options an actual design that is specific enough that we can do our modeling for the area, including economic modeling, because we don't want to say have something that would take all the development till 2100, we couldn't possibly fill it, so it would be empty space, or that it might cannibalize other people's options, etc. So that's important to keep in mind, and that backs off onto how the transportation.
Just curious, are you going to have a feedback loop where if you model the transportation and it's like, wow, it's a little more hot than we thought, and you back off a little bit on the densities?
That's exactly.
Yeah.
What keeps happening to me? Could be further than I meant to. Sorry. So yes, that's what this phase 3 would have to have a feedback loop, but we had to be kind of specific about something that was specific enough that would allow us to model something that is meaningful, and then that would be fed back in, and then that would give us a design for the end game that we could then have our implementation regulatory mechanisms that would lead to that outcome, as opposed to some amorphous thing that doesn't necessarily generate the outcome that we had intended. So,
Andrew,
yes.
before you get too far along, would you spend a minute with us on this table, explaining to us what the columns represent?
All right. Well, these we had different scenarios, and the county center, we had to have a kind of a what's the purpose of these different meetings? Is it timed?
No.
Okay.
So are the 3 columns?
So we had, it was a center on 29, just a garden variety, a little village, but it's a node, but it's a small one. Is this a more significant, it's a very important center on on Route 29. Or no, this would be like a new county center that might have an, say, the new if we had a new county administration building and we moved that up there, what would that do? Where would that go?
But the three columns, are they just the size of the county building or the size of
There are a lot of data points here. There's how much new retail could we have with a special economic capture rate. So if we got 25% of the development that's expected to come by in the next 20 years, we captured that here at the Rio interchange. That would have a certain spread
So
of
you're talking about the economic development of the entire county, 25% in that spot.
Yes. Now, what would that do for that particular scenario? What would be the amount of residences? What would be the trip generation for that particular option? How would it split out? What would be the parking impacts of that particular thing, etc.?
Is there any symbolic of the shaded columns? Is that sort of what you're going to?
Those were the selected options.
Okay.
So this was this is group 3, group 2, and group 1 selection.
I got you.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that corresponds to group 1, group 2, group 3. All right?
What's the BAU?
Business as usual.
And so,
That's
where
doing
did you
nothing.
get all the numbers? Did you have a consultant? Did you have data? How did-
We had a group of people generate those numbers through
Right.
just grinding through based on those assumptions, knowing what our absorption rates, et cetera. It took
So this
a
is
number of
on
people.
your staff?
This was staff and working with public interaction.
Okay. That's really important.
So that leads us to the timelines, and so we had the kickoff and May charrette, and you saw the results of the May charrette. That led us to 3 scenarios, so this is where we are now. No, by pressing I'm not allowed to press the red button. I guess so. Okay, so the July timeframe, we're going to flesh out those 3 scenarios to actually show what they kind of look like, what the massing would be, how many blocks would be involved, because we can draw them theoretically, but we can't. The reality is people are thinking that we can absorb an awful lot more stuff than we really can. So that was really critical, and so that's what our consultant is doing for us, RPG, and we just got announced we got the grant to do that. And
Oh, that's the VDOT technical grant?
the OIPI grant.
Oh, wow, I just read about that.
Okay, so
Congratulations, by the way.
thank you very much. Although we don't have the official paperwork yet.
And you got that because that was your identified UDA? How did you?
Yes.
Yeah, so the
Place is
UDAs are.
29.
Place is
Yeah,
29.
well,
Identified
okay.
as needed.
Yeah, so we gotta start using that big time.
So then in mid-July, it looks like we're going to have a charrette that will pick then which one of those 3 scenarios is the one we want to flesh out. Kind of like what you're doing. You've got your opportunities. We've got a little bit more detail as some of the elements of that, but to help our public get the arms around it. But then ultimately, there'll be one choice that will do amenities phasing, rough transportation, and economic vetting, and then the template implementation strategies. If we're doing something big and complex, we're going to need more invasive, more detailed regulations to make it happen. And if it's pretty close to just tweaking sort of and making it more of a village, we may not need to have that degree of specificity in the regulations to make it happen. We don't know yet. So that's the concept there. And then in September, after everybody's seen this again, there will be some final comments and adjustments based on that, which will then lead to the final recommendation for the board to endorse moving forward for a bond. So that's our particular process. And the reason I brought this up is that I think there's a lot, you hear the parallels, but also these things are related to what you're doing. So for instance, these are both going to be major transit stops and with TOD design requiring transit priority. And make no mistake, Chuck is right. If you fix one problem someplace, you're sending a bottleneck someplace else. And so you need to take that into account. Only with the paradigm shift are you really going to change that. So it requires that capture rate that you talked about, but also having a way to connect that captured area and give them an alternative to putting them all in single occupancy vehicles in order to solve this problem. So that gives us an issue that what if we don't talk together and we put the transit stops too close, for instance? That could be a risk. So it's important to keep this dialogue open. One risks diluting the other. So let's say you, at hydraulic, we're trying to do the same kinds of target elements that we have at Rio 29. That would risk one either cannibalizing each other at the extreme or certainly making it harder to fill space, and maybe we need to consider time in that. Transportation works better when you work as a system rather than something in isolation. So what we capture in Rio makes a difference as to what impacts you all there. And remember, Hillsdale, which is a key part of your network, also impacts what happens at Rio. So it's important to keep us in the dialogue. We also risk confusing the public. Wait a minute, what are you doing? You've got Rio, you've got hydraulic, and that it's helpful. It was often helpful to compare and contrast because there's so many things that are alike, but also things that are different. And I think that's important to keep in mind. It may be an opportunity for establishing distinctive character. Since Rio is relatively new from a, say, an architectural standpoint, but you're impacting a lot more existing neighborhoods in the hydraulic area. Maybe one's more traditional architecture, one's more modern. I don't know, but I'm just throwing that out there. But it is an opportunity for the branding and the what you call it, the magazine shop. So, public education and feedback synergies. Just like we learned today, I didn't have to go through all the planning stuff because you've already seen that. We may be able to take some advantages of educating the public in this process by using the same educational methods. We're using the same methods in the two techniques, etc. Green infrastructure opportunities, because again, the connections are also true for green infrastructure connected equipment. So that's basically it. I just thought that that might lead this group, which I would recommend. I have 3 suggestions: using regular cross-reporting to improve the understanding of each plan on the other.
Sure.
Assure presentation materials and scheduling are shared to minimize conflicts and avoid confusing public. And county and city staff to coordinate with the TJPDC so that any potential issues can be brought to this panel by its representatives, including scheduling issues, because you guys don't need to be all looking at your book and spending an hour and a half during this meeting trying to come up with a date. You know, similar to the way we do things as staff before they go to city council, for instance. So that's all I'm particularly advocating, and we want to be a resource for you, and we learn from your materials to inform us as we move forward. And that's all I have.
Alex and Chip, is there any reason why you guys can't be coordinating?
Well, we want to make sure we're being transparent, but I think there is that opportunity with your permission.
We support the city and the county and the MPO coordinating, since these are city and county efforts.
Absolutely.
So anything that y'all meet on and discuss as far as conflicts, similarities, anything like that, if it relates to hydraulic, all we ask is you bring it back to this panel.
I just have a question. While we're talking about Rio and Ron, this is great. Thank you for getting everybody to get on the same page before we get going on. What have we done as a community as far as the market studies for what can actually be supported? I'm just curious as to just throwing the question out there, because I have to say I don't know the answer to that question. I'm curious.
I can't answer for the city. I know a lot about what's happened in the county because I've been working with our economic development department. We've been studying our absorption rates, and we've been studying the people that have been coming to us, and we've based our data and trending based on county data. But you're right.
Is there a way?
We should be. I mean, there's natural synergies, and why should we compete in elbow each other trying to get
well,
the same?
Well, this is timely because in September, the county and the city are going to have a memorandum of understanding about economics. Right?
I would hope. We're working on that. But part of the concern, certainly from my board, is what are we going to do? Because if we're signing a memorandum of understanding around economic development, and then we're competing with each other and pulling from one to the other and offering incentives to leave the county to go to the city and vice versa. I mean, and I'm just looking at one, wondering, market study-wise, isn't that something we ought to maybe...
Why not do it together?
I'm just saying, it just seems like to me...
We could bring that up at the summit and have
There would be some real benefit for the city and county going together, hiring economic feasibility, fiscal impact study. We have done on one aspect, but you can determine based upon the growth rate of the communities, which is about 1,500 to 1,800 people a year. A good consultant can come in and tell you what the demand's going to be for retail, what's going to be for office, what's going to be for housing, single family, multifamily. That information can be made available.
I think that would be a very,
It's not going to be expensive. It's not expensive.
yeah, very good thing for the city and the county to look at. And Mark, I mean, Alex, what do you all think? Sal back there, you're doing some of this work, Andrew, I mean.
There may be also the timing of it may be very opportunistic, I think, getting off of hydraulic here a little bit, but a recommendation has been made for the regional Go Virginia study. The consulting team, I can't say, well, yeah, it has been public, but it's an outside source, but the recommendation was actually for the largest team that submitted one of 12 proposals. So there's very good firms that are already here working from today until September.
Interesting.
So there may be an opportunity to
tag
talk with
on.
them while they're already doing a portion of the work. They could perhaps contract to do what it is the city and county want. Something
Maybe we
talk
need to
about
have that
later.
done by
Yeah, Kathy,
Buy
I
our
just think
sign.
that's something that we really
Okay.
should think about. And I don't know how we exactly mark them.
Okay, if I could use some of the conversation to bring us back to hydraulic too. During some of the meetings for the city, the whole nodal development, it's come up a couple of times, well, why isn't Barracks Road, shouldn't we extend the hydraulic boundary to Barracks Road? And we've responded that that's a separate planning area. But I think that, for the city, this is coming up in some of the meetings, so it's something you all may want to look at.
Well, and you can see that the note is based on a walkable metric as well.
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
pedestrian shed, not a car commute zone.
But it would be very interesting to look at getting some
So,
information for our
maybe,
two
Diane,
communities.
we need to
I'd be very interested.
think about how, and Alex, we need to talk to Maurice about that and get together with Chip, get our
Maybe Chip could see
Our
about,
CEOs,
he
yeah.
has folks, since they're folks in town.
Could you
You
convene
guys
a
work
meeting
on,
with
work
Maurice
on
and
that?
Alex?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And
That'd be great.
Doug and Andrew. Chip, thank you so much.
Okay. Very good.
Me?
Andrew, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, on the home stretch here, real quick. Oops. Time for any open discussion or requests for future agenda items. I have a couple things that I wrote down we need to do. One was to come up with some case studies of similar projects, the before and after, the grade separation, the lack of eliminating turn movements. There was some talk about clarifying what exactly we're doing at the charrette, maybe the agenda, how we're going to do that on the 23rd. Yep. And then the last item was the city and the county working together on this market study and trying to work something out. My one concern there is the time it may take to do that and its ability to inform, what Sal's doing. So,
We'll be back again. What was the last time discussed?
the one before the charrette.
No, Mark, one after.
Oh, the city and the county, their understanding.
I didn't
Right.
see that as
That's outside.
separate.
It's outside.
Because I just think it's.
I just think it would
Because
inform.
right now, Sal's
what
working
we're
on the
doing.
framework, and
Right.
this is going to inform what we ultimately do in terms of zoning.
Yeah.
code.
Yeah. So it's not, that's not
We're
an
not
issue
there
for the
yet.
panel, it's an
No,
issue
it's
for
not.
members of the panel
This
to
was
do
just a really,
external.
it was a really good opportunity to bring it up because
No,
we
this
sitting
is
in
really well
county here,
done.
we have Andrew.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Just to get did that.
Yeah.
I do have one question for Andrew, if I may, because I want to get a sense of the timing of the work of RPG coming in. Is RPG going to be helping you write the code? Or what is they're doing the testing of the
They're doing the template, they're doing the design-specific, the massing, the organization of the blocks, making sure, for instance, if we have, 100,000 square feet, how they get
Okay,
allocated,
so
how
they're
the
going to
parking-
take your economic data and your
And they're going to flesh it out in a visit, because our board wanted to have something that you could fly through and get a
Right.
feel for that. How many stories would that mean on the main street, et cetera, and what does that mean in terms of available
So the
opportunities
market
for
study
housing?
now would be like ground truthing that.
Yes, so
So to know. and-
how much housing, what kind of mix of housing, because we both have common housing interests, and how do we get middle housing?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
And how long did it take for you to get your grant?
Well, we still don't, even though we got the grant, we still don't have the paperwork yet, so I guess we don't have it
So
yet.
when did you submit an application?
Well, because we had the phase 1 where we had a grant, and then phase 2 we submitted in probably April.
Yeah, it's late April. The first one took us, the phase 1, took us about 3.5 months to get that final, to get from application. It actually wasn't too bad.
No, that's not bad at all.
As far as the grant, compared to most grant.
But we were talking with them the entire time. I mean, it wasn't like they were out of touch.
Okay. Good discussion today. Are there any topics you want to bring up for next time we put on the agenda? We all good with what we accomplished today? I ran down the list of things. 2 of them were panel related. One of them was
Kind of us.
panel member outside this panel doing some things. Okay, I think that's it. Next,
One real quick last thing, and I missed this at the beginning, but Katie, do you want to announce why you're here? Introduce yourself.
I'm not sure if I have before. I missed the past couple meetings due to conflicts, but I'm here from the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. I'm mostly here to listen in, to keep up to date with what's going on with this process. As you all have been discussing, transit could be a really big part of this, and your PT wants to know what thoughts are, and I've been in contact a bit with Dave about it, but yeah, just here to make sure I'm not, or DOT is not missing out.
Yeah, and we had a request very early on to have DRPT be a technical representative here, so I just wanted to make sure everybody knows who Katie is and why she's here. Thank you. Sorry. I should have called that.
Thank you for coming.
All right, with that, I think our next meeting is on the 22nd. Thank you all for being here.